The scent of vanilla and cinnamon danced through the air. As Theodora Zimmerman measured 3 cups of flour with such precision that even the dust motes seemed to settle in perfect alignment around her, afraid to disturb her concentration in the small bakery that had become the heart of Palisade, Colorado, in the spring of 1878. "To the nearest grain, as always," she murmured to herself, a small smile playing on her lips as she added the flour to her mixing bowl. Her hazel eyes focused with an intensity that had earned her both respect and gentle teasing from the townsfolk who relied on her baked goods to brighten their days in the rugged frontier town. Theodora Thea, to those who knew her well, had arrived in Palisade just over a year ago, a 24-year-old widow with nothing but a trunk of belongings, her mother's recipe book, and an unwavering belief that precision and order could rebuild a life shattered by loss. Her late husband's consumption had taken him quickly back east, leaving her alone and determined to forge a new path where memories couldn't find her. The bell above the door jingled, pulling her from her methodical work. Thea glanced up, flour dusting her forearms and a smudge likely decorating her cheek, as it often did during her morning baking. "Morning, Miss Zimmerman," came the deep, rumbling voice of Fletcher Kincaid, local rancher and the town's most eligible bachelor at 29. His broad shoulders nearly filled the doorframe, Stetson clutched respectfully in his hands as he entered her domain. "Smells like heaven in here as usual." Thea straightened, wiping her hands on her apron. "Good morning, Mr. Kincaid. Your usual sourdough, I presume?" she asked, her voice carrying the slightest trace of her Pennsylvania upbringing. Fletcher's blue eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, a sight that had caused many local girls to swoon but had thus far failed to penetrate Thea's carefully measured defenses. "And maybe one of those cinnamon rolls if you've got any to spare." "I believe I can accommodate that request," she replied with professional cordiality, moving to the display case where her morning's work was arranged with mathematical precision, each roll exactly the same size, each loaf of bread baked to golden perfection. Fletcher leaned against the counter, watching as she selected his bread and placed it in brown paper with elegant efficiency. "You know, Miss Zimmerman, I've never seen anyone measure ingredients the way you do. Most ladies I know just toss things in by feel. And that, Mr. Kincaid, is why most ladies' bread rises unevenly and lacks consistency," she responded without looking up, though a small smile threatened the corner of her mouth. "Baking is chemistry, not guesswork." "Chemistry, is it?" Fletcher chuckled, placing coins on the counter. "Seems to me like a kind of magic." Now Thea did look up, meeting his eyes with a flash of animation that transformed her normally reserved expression. "Not magic at all, simply science and attention to detail. When flour is measured imprecisely, the ratio of liquid becomes compromised. Too much flour makes for dense, heavy bread. Too little creates a sticky mess that never properly sets. Precision is everything." Fletcher's smile deepened as he accepted his carefully wrapped purchases. "Precision in baking, maybe. But there are some things in life that can't be measured so exactly, Miss Zimmerman." "I haven't found one yet," she replied, already turning back to her workstation where her interrupted recipe awaited. "You will," he said softly, setting his hat back on his head as he moved toward the door. "Some things like beauty or courage defy measurement." He paused, hand on the doorknob. "Or love. Try to measure that, Miss Zimmerman, and you'd need an infinite scale." The bell jingled again as he departed, leaving Thea staring after him, her carefully ordered thoughts suddenly scattered like flour in a breeze. She shook her head and returned to her mixing bowl, determinedly measuring out 2 tablespoons of sugar with her brass spoon. Love was precisely the sort of imprecise nonsense she had left behind when she buried her husband and headed west. Fletcher Kincaid could keep his romantic notions she had bred to bake, and a life to rebuild, one carefully measured cup at a time. The next morning dawned clear and cool, promising another beautiful Colorado spring day. Thea had been up since 4, stoking the bakery ovens and preparing her daily offerings. By 6, the scent of fresh bread permeated the small building that served as both her business and home. The apartment upstairs providing modest but adequate accommodation for her solitary life. The first batch of sourdough loaves had just emerged from the oven when a frantic pounding at her door startled her. The bakery wasn't due to open for another hour. Wiping her hands on her apron, Thea hurried to the door, concern mounting as the pounding continued. She unlatched it to find Mrs. Peterson, the wife of the local blacksmith, her face flushed with panic. "Miss Zimmerman, thank heavens. It's my Martha, the fever's taken a terrible turn and Doc Wilson is away in Grand Junction. They say you know remedies." Thea's composure didn't falter. "Let me gather my things," she said, already untying her apron. Within minutes, she had collected a small wooden box containing herbs and tinctures, knowledge passed down from her grandmother that had served her well when conventional medicine failed. She locked the bakery door behind her, hanging a hastily scrawled sign. "Closed for emergency, will reopen tomorrow." Martha Peterson was 8 years old and burning with a fever that had already claimed 2 children in the county that spring. Thea worked methodically, brewing willow bark tea with precise measurements of honey and lemon to make it palatable for the child. She crushed elderberries for a syrup, carefully counting the drops as she administered it to the feverish girl. "1 teaspoon every 4 hours, she instructed Mrs. Peterson firmly. "No more, no less, and these cool compresses must be changed exactly when the clock strikes the hour." By midday, Martha's fever had stopped climbing, though the battle was far from won. Thea sat by the child's bedside, wiping her brow and monitoring her breathing with the same attention to detail she applied to her most delicate pastries. It was there that Fletcher Kincaid found her, his tall frame filling the bedroom doorway as he arrived with fresh ice from the ice house he maintained on his property. "Heard the little one was sick," he said quietly, setting down a wrapped bundle. "Thought this might help." Thea nodded gratefully, not looking up from her charge. "Perfect timing, Mr. Kincaid. The last compress is losing its efficacy." "You've been here since morning," he observed, noting her flour-dusted dress and the fatigue beginning to show around her eyes. "Have you eaten?" "I'm fine," she replied automatically. Fletcher shook his head. "I'll be back in 20 minutes, he said, his tone brooking no argument. True to his word, he returned with a basket containing a thermos of hot coffee, fresh bread not hers, she noted with professional disapproval, and slices of roast beef. "Eat," he said, setting it beside her. "The child needs you strong." Thea looked up, momentarily surprised by his thoughtfulness. "Thank you," she said simply. Fletcher pulled up a chair on the opposite side of Martha's bed. "My sister had the fever when she was about this age," he said conversationally. "Scared us all half to death. Ma used cold apple cider vinegar wraps on her feet." "An effective treatment," Thea nodded, taking a careful bite of the sandwich he'd prepared. "The acetic acid helps draw out the heat. I've added a small amount to these compresses, precisely 2 tablespoons per quart of water." Fletcher smiled across the sick bed at her. "Of course you measured it exactly. Medicine requires precision, Mr. Kincaid, just like baking." "Fletcher," he corrected gently. "After sharing a sick vigil, I think we can dispense with formalities, Miss Zimmerman." She hesitated, then gave a small nod. "Theodora," she offered. though most call me Thea." "Thea," he repeated, and something about the way her name sounded in his deep voice made her glance quickly back at her young patient. They sat in companionable silence as the afternoon waned, Thea administering medicines at precisely timed intervals while Fletcher entertained them with quiet stories of his ranch and the antics of the new foal born just last week. "You should see him, all legs and attitude," he chuckled. "Reminds me of myself as a boy, my ma used to say." "All legs and attitude?" Thea asked with a small smile, the first genuine one he'd seen from her. Among other unflattering comparisons, he confirmed, pleased to have broken through her reserve if only momentarily. As evening approached, Martha's fever finally broke. The child's eyes fluttered open, clear for the first time in days, and she managed a weak smile at the sight of her mother's tears of joy. "You've worked a miracle, Miss Zimmerman," Mrs. Peterson declared, hugging Thea with abandon. Thea extricated herself carefully. "No miracle, just science and careful attention. Continue with the tincture for 3 more days, exactly as I've shown you." Outside the Peterson home, the sunset painted the western sky in dramatic oranges and pinks. Thea stood for a moment on the porch, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was after the day's tension. "May I walk you home?" Fletcher asked, appearing beside her with her wooden remedy box in his hands. Too tired to maintain her usual barriers, she nodded gratefully. They walked in silence through Palisade's dusty Main Street, the town settling into evening routines around them, lamps being lit in windows, the saloon down the way beginning to buzz with activity, a dog barking somewhere in the distance. "You're quite something, you know," Fletcher said finally as they approached her bakery. "The way you handled that situation, so calm, so certain." Thea shrugged slightly. "I simply applied what I know. Proper measurements, careful timing, and saved a child's life," he added. "Don't diminish that, Thea." She looked up at him, struck by the sincerity in his eyes. For a moment, something warm and unfamiliar fluttered in her chest. "Thank you for your help today," she said, deliberately changing the subject as she reached for her key. "And for the food." Fletcher handed her the remedy box, their fingers brushing momentarily. "It was my pleasure. Though I do expect proper bread tomorrow, that store-bought stuff is an offense to someone of your talents." The unexpected compliment brought a flush to her cheeks that she attributed to exhaustion. "The bakery will be open at the usual time," she assured him, turning to unlock her door. "Thea," he said, causing her to pause, "what you did today, it matters. You matter to this town." She stood with her back to him, key in the lock, suddenly fighting an unexpected wave of emotion. "Good night, Fletcher," she managed, pushing the door open. "Good night, Thea," he replied softly. "Sleep well." Inside her bakery, surrounded by the familiar scents of flour and yeast, Thea leaned against the closed door, her carefully measured life suddenly feeling strangely unbalanced. The next morning, despite her exhaustion, Thea rose at her usual hour and prepared her ovens. Her hands moved through the familiar motions, measuring, mixing, kneading, finding comfort in the precision of her work. By the time she unlocked the bakery door at 7, her display cases were filled as if yesterday's interruption had never occurred. Her first customer was Mayor Hollister's wife, eager for gossip as much as for cinnamon rolls. "Everyone's talking about how you saved the Peterson girl, Mrs. Hollister said, eyes bright with curiosity. "And how Fletcher Kincaid hardly left your side the whole time." Thea maintained her composure as she wrapped the requested pastries. "Mr. Kincaid was kind enough to bring ice and offer assistance," she said neutrally. "The community's support was invaluable." "Hum," Mrs. Hollister responded, clearly unconvinced by Thea's professional tone. "Well, It hasn't escaped notice that he's been in here almost every morning since you opened shop. Man never showed much interest in baked goods before you came to town." "That will be 35 cents, Mrs. Hollister," Thea replied, expertly redirecting the conversation. The morning brought a steady stream of customers, many offering thanks and praise for her role in Martha Peterson's recovery. Thea accepted their gratitude with modest grace, deflecting attention whenever possible. Fletcher didn't appear that morning, and Thea told herself the twinge of disappointment she felt was merely concern for a customer's well-being. By mid-afternoon, the bakery had quieted, and she turned her attention to preparing doughs for the next day's baking. The back door opened without warning, startling her from her work. Fletcher stood there, looking somewhat sheepish. "I apologize for coming through the back," he said, "but I didn't want to parade this through your shop." He held up a magnificent rainbow trout, freshly caught and cleaned. "A thank you for yesterday. Figured you might not have had time to think about supper." Thea stared at the fish, then at the man holding it. No one had thought about her meals since her husband's death. "That's very thoughtful," she said, genuinely surprised. "But unnecessary." "Necessary or not, it's yours," he replied, placing it on a clean section of her work table. "Caught it in the creek that runs through the north end of my property. Best fishing spot in the county." Thea approached the fish, appreciating its fresh, clear eyes and the skill of the clean gutting. "It's beautiful," she admitted. "Thank you." "You're welcome," Fletcher said, shifting his weight slightly. "I was thinking. That is, I wondered if you might enjoy eating it while I tell you about the spot where I caught it. Perhaps this evening." Thea looked up sharply, suddenly understanding. "Mr. Kincaid, are you asking to court me?" Fletcher's tanned face flushed slightly, but he met her eyes directly. "I believe I am, Miss Zimmerman, though I was trying to be somewhat less direct about it." "I appreciate directness," she replied automatically, her mind racing. "It's efficient." A smile tugged at his mouth. "Is that a yes or a no to supper?" Thea hesitated. She had come to Palisade to build a new life centered around her bakery, not to entertain suitors. Yet something about Fletcher Kincaid had begun to intrigue her, his kindness, his steady presence, the way he seemed to see beyond her carefully constructed walls. "Yes," she heard herself say. "Supper would be acceptable." His smile broadened. "High praise indeed. Shall I return at 7?" She nodded, already mentally calculating how to adjust her evening routine to accommodate this unexpected development. 7 it is," he said, heading back toward the door. He paused with his hand on the latch. "And Thea, I promise not to measure the seasonings when I cook the fish. Some things taste better with a little improvisation." She arched an eyebrow. "We'll see about that, Mr. Kincaid." His laughter followed him out the door, a rich sound that seemed to linger in the bakery long after he'd gone. Thea returned to her measurements with renewed focus, trying to ignore the unfamiliar fluttering sensation in her stomach. It had been a long time since she'd shared a meal with a man, or anyone, for that matter. Her life in Palisade had been one of work and solitude, precisely as she had planned it. Yet as she precisely measured flour for tomorrow's sourdough starter, she found herself wondering if perhaps there was room in her carefully ordered life for something she hadn't planned for at all. At exactly 7 o'clock, Fletcher Kincaid knocked on the bakery's back door, now dressed in a clean shirt with his hair still damp from washing. Thea had changed into one of her two good dresses, a simple blue cotton that brought out the flecks of gold in her hazel eyes. "Right on time," she said approvingly as she opened the door. "I figured punctuality would earn me points with a woman who times her bread baking to the minute," he replied with a smile, holding up a basket. "I brought the fixings." Thea had cleared her work table and covered it with her best tablecloth, admittedly not saying much, but the gesture wasn't lost on Fletcher. He set about preparing the fish while she contributed a loaf of her sourdough bread and some early spring vegetables she'd purchased from a local farmer. My mother would be scandalized by this arrangement, Thea commented as she sliced the bread with precise, even strokes. A woman entertaining a man alone in her home would be considered quite improper back east. Good thing we're in Colorado, then, Fletcher replied, skillfully seasoning the fish. Out here, folks are generally more concerned with whether you're decent and hardworking than with following Eastern social rules. I've noticed, Thea said dryly. Mrs. Hollister was quite eager to inform me that the town is already gossiping about us after yesterday. Fletcher winced slightly. Small towns, no secrets. He glanced at her. Does that bother you? She considered the question seriously. I came here for a fresh start, not to be the subject of gossip, but I suppose it's inevitable in a community this size. A fresh start, he echoed, focusing on the fish. From what, if you don't mind my asking? Thea's knife paused mid-slice. My husband died, she said finally. Consumption. We'd been married 3 years. Fletcher's expression softened with genuine sympathy. I'm sorry, Thea, that must have been difficult. It was, she acknowledged, resuming her slicing with renewed precision. Timothy was a good man, a professor of mathematics. He appreciated order and logic as I do. How long ago? Almost 2 years now. She placed the bread slices in a perfect row on a plate. Afterward, I couldn't bear to stay in our home, surrounded by memories and well-meaning neighbors. When I saw the advertisement for a building with commercial space in Palisade, it seemed providential. Fletcher nodded, understanding in his eyes. Fresh starts are what the West is built on. He turned the fish in the pan. I came here 10 years ago with nothing but a battered saddle and the clothes on my back, running from a father who used his fists more than his words. Thea looked up, surprised by his candor. I'm sorry, he shrugged. Ancient history now. Worked as a ranch hand until I saved enough to buy my own small spread. Built it up from there. Pride colored his voice. 300 acres now, 40 head of cattle, 8 horses, and a view of the mountains that makes every hard day worth it. That's impressive, Thea said sincerely. Just determined, he replied, echoing her earlier modesty. Like someone else I know who built a thriving bakery from nothing. Their eyes met across the table, a moment of shared understanding passing between them. Dinner proved surprisingly comfortable. Fletcher told stories of ranch life that made Thea laugh more than she had in months, while she shared anecdotes of customer quirks and baking disasters from her early attempts. So there I was, she said, eyes bright with amusement, covered head to toe in flour because I'd forgotten to close the canister before lifting it, and in walks the banker for my loan inspection. Fletcher's laugh filled the bakery kitchen. What did you do? The only thing I offered him a perfect loaf of bread and pretended nothing was amiss, despite looking like I'd been caught in a snowstorm. Did it work? I got the loan, she confirmed with a small, triumphant smile. Though Mr. Adams still gives me curious looks sometimes. As Fletcher helped her clear the dishes later, their hands brushed occasionally, each brief contact sending an unexpected warmth through Thea's fingers. It had been a long time since she'd experienced the simple pleasure of sharing a meal and conversation with someone who seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts. Thank you for dinner, she said as he prepared to leave. The fish was delicious, even with your imprecise seasoning. High praise from the queen of measurement, he teased, settling his hat on his head. I've enjoyed this evening, Thea. As have I, she admitted, standing in the doorway. He hesitated, then reached out slowly to brush a strand of hair from her cheek. The gesture was gentle, almost reverent. Might I call on you again? Thea felt a flutter of something both frightening and exhilarating. "I would like that," she said softly. His smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "Good night, then. Sweet dreams." "Good night, Fletcher." She watched him walk away down the moonlit street, his tall figure gradually disappearing into the darkness. Only when he had vanished completely did she close the door, leaning against it as she had 2 nights before, but this time, the unsettled feeling in her chest was not entirely unwelcome. In the weeks that followed, Fletcher became a regular fixture in Thea's carefully ordered life. He appeared reliably each morning for fresh bread, often lingering to chat while she served other customers. Twice a week, he would arrive at closing time to escort her on walks around Palisade or to community gatherings. The townsfolk watched their courtship with approving eyes. Fletcher Kincaid was well respected, a successful rancher with a kind heart and steady hand. Theodora Zimmerman had proven herself a valuable addition to the community, not only with her exceptional baking, but also with her knowledge of herbal remedies and her quiet generosity toward those in need. "You've got half the town's bachelors eating their hearts out," teased Sally Watson, the dressmaker, as Thea selected fabric for a new Sunday dress in late April. "Fletcher Kincaid could have had his pick of girls from here to Denver, but he only has eyes for our baker." Thea felt her cheeks warm. "We're merely friends," she protested, though the words rang hollow even to her own ears. Sally snorted inelegantly. "Friends don't look at each other the way that man looks at you when you're not watching, like you're some kind of miracle he can't quite believe." The thought followed Thea throughout the day. That evening, when Fletcher arrived to take her to the spring social at the church, she found herself studying him when he wasn't looking, the strong line of his jaw, the way his hands moved with surprising grace for their size, the genuine warmth in his eyes when he greeted even the town's most difficult residents. "You're quiet tonight," he observed as they walked home under a canopy of stars, the music from the social fading behind them. "Did you not enjoy yourself?" "I did," she assured him. "I was just thinking." "About what?" She hesitated, then decided on honesty. "About you, actually." He stopped walking, turning to face her in the moonlight. "Should I be worried?" "No," she said softly. "I was thinking how unexpected you are in my life. I came here with very specific plans and they didn't include this." She gestured vaguely between them. "This," he repeated, a smile playing at his lips. "And what exactly is this, Thea? I think it's time we measured it properly, don't you?" She looked up at him, her heart beating a rhythm she couldn't quite calculate. "I'm not sure it can be measured." "Now that," he said, stepping closer, "is progress. The precision-minded baker admits some things defy measurement." "I didn't say that exactly," she protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Fletcher reached out, taking her hand in his. His palm was warm, calloused from ranch work but infinitely gentle as it enveloped her fingers. "Thea Zimmerman, I'm falling in love with you," he said simply. "Have been since the first day I watched you measure flour like you were handling gold dust. Would like your permission to court you properly with intention." Thea felt the world tilt slightly. "Fletcher," she breathed, his name both question and answer. "I know you came here for independence," he continued earnestly. "I'm not asking you to give that up. Your bakery, your life, they're yours. I just want the chance to be part of it if you'll have me." She looked at their joined hands, then up at his face, so open, so honest in the moonlight. The careful walls she'd built around her heart since Timothy's death seemed suddenly fragile, unnecessary. "Yes," she whispered. "I'd like that very much." His smile was radiant as he bent his head slowly toward hers, giving her every chance to pull away. But Thea found herself rising to meet him, her free hand coming to rest against his chest, as their lips met in a gentle, questioning kiss that quickly deepened into something that sent warmth cascading through her veins. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Fletcher rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that since you lectured me about proper flower measurement," he confessed. A laugh bubbled up from somewhere deep inside her. "That long?" "That long," he confirmed, pressing another quick kiss to her lips as if he couldn't help himself now that he'd started. "You're extraordinary, Thea Zimmerman. Absolutely extraordinary." For once in her life, Theodora didn't feel the need to deflect or minimize. She simply accepted the compliment with a smile that lit her entire face, making her look younger and more carefree than Fletcher had ever seen her. Hand in hand, they continued their walk home, the night somehow brighter than it had been moments before. As spring melted into summer, Palisade bloomed with wildflowers and the promise of abundant harvests. Thea's bakery thrived, becoming not just a business but a community gathering place. She expanded her offerings to include fruit pies made with local produce and special cakes for celebrations. Each creation measured and executed with her trademark precision. Fletcher courted her with the same steady determination he applied to everything in his life. Flowers appeared regularly on her work table, wildflowers gathered from the meadows near his ranch, arranged with more enthusiasm than skill, but cherished nonetheless. He built her sturdy new shelves for her growing collection of baking supplies and herbs, measured exactly to her specifications. On Sundays after church, they would ride out to his ranch, where Thea gradually came to know every acre of the land he'd built with his own hands. She marveled at the orderly rows of his small orchard, the sturdy fences, the comfortable farmhouse that somehow managed to be both masculine and welcoming. "I've been adding to it bit by bit," Fletcher explained as he showed her the newly expanded kitchen. "Started with just 2 rooms when I built it 5 years ago." Thea ran her hand along the smooth countertop he'd crafted. "It's beautiful workmanship. Plenty of space for baking," he observed casually, watching her from the corner of his eye. "Should someone with particular talents in that area ever want to try her hand here?" The implication wasn't lost on her, but neither rushed to put words to the future taking shape between them. They were building something careful and strong, one measured step at a time. In late June, disaster struck Palisade in the form of a flash flood that roared down from the mountains after 3 days of torrential rain. The creek that normally provided gentle irrigation to the town's orchards became a raging torrent, washing out bridges and threatening homes built too close to its banks. Thea was working on her morning baking when the church bell began to ring in alarm. Rushing outside, she found the street already filling with concerned citizens as Mayor Hollister organized rescue efforts. "The Martins' place is underwater," someone shouted. "Old man Phillips is trapped on his roof." Without hesitation, Thea returned to her bakery, gathering every loaf of bread and container she could fill with coffee and soup. If people were being displaced, they would need food and comfort. She was loading a wagon borrowed from the grocer when Fletcher appeared, drenched and mud-splattered, clearly having ridden hard from his ranch. "Thea," he called, relief evident in his voice. "You're safe. The bakery?" "Untouched," she confirmed, securing a crate of bread. "We're high enough above the creek, but the lower streets, I know. I crossed through it coming in. The bridge at Orchard Road is gone." He jumped down from his horse, immediately moving to help her. "What are you doing?" "Taking food to the church. They're setting up there for those who have lost homes." He nodded approvingly. "Smart woman. I'm heading back out with some men to check the outlying farms. Some folks might be cut off." Fear clutched at Thea's heart. "Be careful. That water is dangerous." Fletcher paused in his work, taking her face gently between his hands. "I'll be careful," he promised, pressing a quick kiss to her forehead. "Keep the town fed. That's how you can help most. For 3 days, Palisade battled the flood's aftermath. Thea turned her bakery into a relief kitchen, producing bread and simple meals in quantities she'd never attempted before. She worked around the clock, sleeping in brief snatches on the small cot she kept in the back room, measuring and mixing by lamplight when others slept. Fletcher and other able-bodied men worked equally tirelessly, rescuing stranded families, salvaging belongings, and beginning the massive task of rebuilding washed-out roads and bridges. He appeared at the bakery when he could, sometimes just long enough to eat something and exchange a few exhausted words with Thea before heading back out. On the 4th day, as the crisis finally began to ebb, Thea was kneading dough for what felt like the 100th loaf when the back door opened. Fletcher stood there, looking as if he might collapse where he stood. "Fletcher," she gasped, abandoning her work to rush to him. "What's happened? Are you hurt?" He shook his head wearily. "Not hurt, just done in, haven't slept in." He frowned, genuinely unable to remember. Thea guided him to a chair, her practiced eye noting the deep exhaustion etched in every line of his face. "When did you last eat?" he shrugged. "Had some jerky this morning, or maybe that was yesterday." Without another word, she dished up a bowl of the hearty stew she kept simmering for relief workers, adding a thick slice of bread and placing both before him. "Eat," she commanded. "Then you're going to rest." Too tired to argue, Fletcher obeyed, the food disappearing quickly. When he'd finished, Thea took his hand and led him upstairs to her small apartment, a place she'd never before invited him. "Thea, I can't," he began, suddenly concerned about propriety despite his exhaustion. "You can and you will," she cut him off firmly. "You're dead on your feet and liable to kill yourself riding back to your ranch in this state. You'll sleep here where I can keep an eye on you, and the gossips can say what they like." The simple bedroom was as neat and ordered as one would expect from Thea. A quilt with precise geometric patterns covered the narrow bed, and every surface was clean and uncluttered. "Lie down," she instructed, removing his boots despite his weak protests. "I have more bread to finish, then I'll check on you." "Stubborn woman," he murmured, eyes already closing as his head touched the pillow. "Look who's talking," she retorted softly, but he was already asleep. Thea returned downstairs to her baking, a strange new feeling expanding in her chest. The sight of Fletcher asleep in her bed had awakened something fiercely protective in her, something that went beyond the careful affection she'd allowed herself to feel thus far. 4 hours later, her baking complete and distributed, she climbed the stairs again to find Fletcher still deeply asleep. She stood watching him for a long moment, the strong lines of his face relaxed in slumber, one hand curled beside his cheek like a child's. Moving quietly, she prepared a simple pallet on the floor for herself, then extinguished the lamp and lay down to catch what rest she could. She woke at dawn to find Fletcher kneeling beside her makeshift bed, his expression a mixture of tenderness and dismay. "Thea Zimmerman," he said softly as her eyes fluttered open, "did you sleep on the floor of your own bedroom while I took your bed?" She sat up, brushing hair from her face. "You needed proper rest more than I did." "That's not how this works," he said, shaking his head. He reached out, tracing her cheek with gentle fingers. "I've been thinking about something, watching you sleep." "What's that?" she asked, suddenly breathless at his proximity. "I've been in love with you for months now," he said simply. "Falling more in love every day as I watch you measure flour and rescue sick children and feed an entire town during a crisis. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that you might feel something for me too." Thea swallowed hard. "I do," she whispered. "Then I'd like to ask you a question," Fletcher continued, taking her hand. "Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? I know it's not been that long, and I know you value your independence, but I think we'd build something wonderful together. I'd never ask you to give up your baking, in fact. I'd build you the finest kitchen in Colorado if you wanted. I just want to wake up every morning to your precision and care, and show you every day that some things like how much I love you truly can't be measured." Tears filled Thea's eyes, unexpected and unstoppable. "Fletcher," she began, her voice catching, alarm crossed his features. "I'm rushing you, I'm sorry." "No," she interrupted, squeezing his hand. "You're not rushing me, you're perfect timing." A smile broke through her tears. "Yes. Yes, I'll marry you." Joy transformed his tired face as he gathered her into his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "I promise to make you happy, Thea, to build a life with you that's solid and true." "I know you will," she murmured against his shirt. "Because you already do." Later that morning, they emerged from the bakery together, their engagement announcement adding a welcome note of joy to a town still recovering from disaster. Mrs. Hollister proved unsurprised, informing anyone who would listen that she'd predicted the match from the start. "Only took a flood to make them see what was right in front of them," she declared smugly to her sewing circle. "Though if you ask me, that man was smitten from the first loaf of sourdough." News traveled quickly through Palisade. By nightfall, a small crowd had gathered at the bakery bearing congratulatory gifts and knowing smiles. "About time," said Mr. Peterson, shaking Fletcher's hand vigorously. "Town was taking bets on when you'd get around to proposing." "Hope you didn't lose too much money on me," Fletcher laughed. "Actually, I won," confessed Reverend Miller with a sheepish grin. "Had my money on after a major town crisis. Nothing brings folks together like weathering a storm." As the well-wishers finally dispersed, Fletcher pulled Thea close under the summer stars. "I should get back to the ranch," he said reluctantly. "Got animals to check on after being away so long." Thea nodded understanding. "When should we set the date?" she asked practically, already thinking of arrangements to be made. Fletcher considered. "How about August? After the worst heat has passed but before harvest gets too demanding." 6 weeks, Thea calculated. "That's reasonable. The church on the 15th, he chuckled. "Planning already." "With your usual precision, I see." "Of course," she replied primly. "A wedding requires organization." "As long as it ends with you as my wife," Fletcher said, stealing a kiss that left her breathless, "you can organize it however you like." The 6 weeks leading to their wedding passed in a whirlwind of preparation and recovery. Palisade gradually rebuilt what the flood had damaged, with Fletcher leading many of the efforts to restore bridges and roads. Thea continued her baking while also preparing for the transition to married life. "I'll keep the bakery open," she explained to Fletcher as they discussed their future. "But perhaps not 7 days a week as I do now. I'll need time for the ranch as well." "We'll make it work," he assured her, helping her inventory her equipment to determine what would move to the ranch kitchen and what would stay in the town bakery. "I've been thinking of building a small cottage near the orchard could serve as a weekend home when you need to be in town for early baking." Thea's heart swelled at his thoughtfulness. "You've considered everything." "Not quite everything," he admitted with a grin. "Still trying to figure out how to measure up to your exacting standards." She raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" "Hum," he murmured, pulling her close. "Though I'm enjoying the research process." Their wedding day dawned clear and perfect, the kind of late summer day that seemed created especially for celebrations. The church overflowed with townsfolk and ranchers from miles around, all eager to witness the union of the precise baker and the steadfast rancher. Thea wore a gown of ivory silk that Sally Watson had labored over for weeks, embroidered with delicate wildflowers that matched the blooms in her bouquet. As she walked down the aisle on Mayor Hollister's arm, having no family present to give her away, her eyes found Fletcher's and remained there, anchored by the love and certainty she found in his gaze. "Dearly beloved," began Reverend Miller, beaming at the couple before him. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt, the traditional vows spoken with genuine commitment by both bride and groom. When Fletcher slid the simple gold band onto Thea's finger, his hands were steady and sure. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," declared the Reverend. "Fletcher, you may kiss your bride." Fletcher cradled Thea's face between his hands with infinite tenderness. "Hello, Mrs. Kincaid," he whispered, just for her. "Hello, husband," she replied, a smile of pure joy illuminating her face as he lowered his lips to hers. The celebration that followed at the town hall lasted well into the evening, with music and dancing and enough food to feed an army, courtesy of contributions from every household in Palisade. Thea had baked their wedding cake herself, a three-tiered masterpiece that drew gasps of admiration when it was presented. "Measured to perfection, I assume," teased Fletcher as they cut the first slice together. "Of course," she replied with mock seriousness. 4 cups of flour, exactly 2 cups of sugar." He silenced her recitation with a kiss that earned cheers and good-natured whistles from their guests. As twilight deepened into night, the newlyweds slipped away from the celebration, boarding the buggy Fletcher had decorated with ribbons and wildflowers for the journey to their ranch, their home. The house welcomed them with lamps already lit, courtesy of Fletcher's ranch hand who had prepared everything for their arrival. Thea stood in the doorway, suddenly shy despite the weeks of preparation. Fletcher solved her uncertainty by sweeping her into his arms. "Traditional threshold crossing," he explained with a grin, carrying her into the house as if she weighed nothing at all. "I'm perfectly capable of walking," she protested, though her arms wound naturally around his neck. "I know," he replied, setting her gently on her feet in the middle of the main room. "But some traditions are worth honoring." He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his expression growing serious. "Welcome home, Thea Kincaid." The name still felt new and wonderful to her ears. "Home," she repeated softly, looking around at what was now their shared domain. Fletcher reached for her hands. "I have something to show you," he said, leading her toward the kitchen. When he opened the door, Thea gasped in surprise. The already excellent kitchen had been transformed with new shelves and counters. Gleaming copper pots hung in precise rows. And in the center, a massive oak work table with a set of shining new measuring implements arranged in perfect order. "Fletcher," she breathed, moving forward to run her fingers over the beautiful tools. "When did you do all this?" "Been working on it for weeks," he admitted, watching her face with obvious pleasure at her reaction. "Wanted it to be perfect for you." She picked up a brass measuring cup, noting the precise calibration marks along its side. "These are exquisite. Only the best for the woman who measures ingredients with such precision," he said, moving to stand behind her, his arms encircling her waist. "Though I still maintain," he added, pressing a kiss to the sensitive spot just below her ear, "that my love for you would overwhelm any scale you tried to measure it on." Thea leaned back against him, the measuring cup still clutched in her hand. "I'm beginning to believe you might be right about that," she conceded, turning in his embrace to face him. "Some things do defy measurement." His smile was tender as he lifted her easily to sit on the edge of the work table. "Mrs. Kincaid," he murmured, stepping between her knees, "I believe this is the start of a beautiful experiment." "An experiment," she echoed, her arms twining around his neck. "Hum," he confirmed, his lips hovering just above hers, "to see just how immeasurable love can be." As his mouth claimed hers with newfound authority, Thea surrendered to the sweet realization that some quantities like the joy flooding her heart and the future stretching before them were indeed beyond calculation. The first year of marriage brought challenges and joys in equal measure. Thea maintained her bakery in town, rising before dawn 3 days a week to produce the breads and pastries her customers had come to rely on. The other 4 days, she devoted to life at the ranch, gradually transforming the bachelor household into a true home while learning the rhythms of ranch life. Fletcher proved a patient teacher as she mastered horseback riding and the basic care of livestock. In turn, she taught him the finer points of bread making, though he remained stubbornly resistant to precise measurements. Cooking should have room for inspiration, he insisted one evening as they prepared supper together, adding a pinch of herbs to the stew without consulting a recipe. Baking is chemistry, she countered, the familiar argument now a comfortable routine between them. Precision ensures consistent results. And what about love? He asked, pulling her away from her careful vegetable chopping to dance her around the kitchen. Is that chemistry too? Perhaps, she admitted, laughing as he spun her under his arm, though I've failed to identify the exact formula. Good, he declared triumphantly. Some mysteries should remain unsolved. Winter came early that year, blanketing the ranch in deep snow by mid-November. The isolation might have bothered Thea once, but now she treasured the quiet evenings by the fire, Fletcher reading aloud while she worked on mending or knitted beside him. They developed a shared language of small gestures and private jokes, the secret vocabulary of a marriage growing stronger with each passing day. Spring arrived with its usual chaos of new calves and foals, keeping Fletcher busy from sunup to sundown. Thea expanded her herb garden behind the house, carefully planting rows of medicinal and culinary plants that would serve both their household and the occasional neighbor in need of remedies. It was while harvesting mint on a warm May afternoon that Thea first felt the telltale wave of nausea. She paused, basket in hand, as realization dawned. Counting backwards in her mind, precise as always, she calculated the timing and smiled to herself. That evening, she prepared Fletcher's favorite meal and waited until he had finished eating before sharing her news. I believe we should convert the small room next to ours into a nursery, she said calmly, pouring him a second cup of coffee. We'll need it by winter. Fletcher's cup froze halfway to his lips. Thea, he said slowly, eyes widening. Are you saying, according to my calculations, we should expect our child around January 10th, she confirmed, unable to keep the smile from spreading across her face. The coffee cup landed with a clatter as Fletcher surged to his feet, lifting Thea from her chair and spinning her in a circle of pure joy. A baby, he crowed, his voice echoing off the rafters. We're having a baby. Careful, she laughed, though she clung to his shoulders with equal excitement. I'm carrying precious cargo now. He set her down immediately, his expression comically shifting to concern as he placed a gentle hand on her still flat abdomen. Are you feeling well? Do you need anything? Should you be resting? I'm perfectly fine, she assured him, covering his hand with her own. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I'll continue my normal activities as long as I'm able. Of course you will, he agreed, knowing better than to suggest otherwise. His face softened with wonder. A baby, Thea, our baby. Half you, half me, she mused. I wonder which half will measure ingredients precisely and which half will toss them in by feel. Fletcher laughed, drawing her close again. Either way, the child will be loved beyond measure. News of the coming baby spread quickly through Palisade, bringing a steady stream of visitors bearing advice and gifts. Thea accepted both with gracious patience, though privately she relied most on her own research and careful observation of the changes in her body. As summer progressed into fall, her figure rounded with new life. Fletcher watched the transformation with undisguised awe, often placing his hands on her growing belly to feel the baby's movements. "Active little thing," he commented one evening as a particularly strong kick caught him by surprise. "Going to be a handful, I reckon." "Takes after its father," Thea replied dryly, shifting to find a more comfortable position on the sofa. "Never still for a moment." Fletcher grinned, unrepentant. "Best prepare yourself, Mrs. Kincaid. I suspect precision and planning are about to meet their match in this little one." As her January due date approached, heavy snows isolated the ranch for days at a time. Fletcher insisted on moving her back to town for the final weeks, renting rooms above the bakery to ensure she would be close to Doc Wilson when her time came. "I'm not taking chances with you two," he said firmly, when she protested leaving the ranch. "The pass can get snowed in for weeks this time of year." Reluctantly, Thea agreed to the temporary relocation. Fletcher divided his time between town and ranch, riding out each day to check on the livestock but returning without fail each evening, often covered in snow but determined to be with his wife. It was during one such heavy snowfall on January 8th that Thea felt the first contractions begin. Fletcher had left for the ranch just hours before, planning to return by nightfall. "Send for my husband," she instructed Mrs. Peterson, who had come to keep her company while Fletcher was away. "And for Doc Wilson." Mrs. Peterson's eyes widened. "Is it time?" "I believe so," Thea confirmed, wincing as another contraction tightened across her abdomen. "Though my calculations suggested another 2 days." "Babies don't much care for calculations," Mrs. Peterson said with a knowing smile as she hurried to dispatch a messenger. Doc Wilson arrived within the hour, his medical bag in hand and snow dusting his coat. "Let's have a look at you, Mrs. Kincaid," he said professionally, though his eyes were kind. The labor progressed steadily through the afternoon and into evening, Thea facing each contraction with the same determined focus she applied to her baking. As darkness fell and the snow continued, her only concern was Fletcher's absence. "The pass," she gasped between pains. "He might not be able to get through." "That man would move mountains to be here," Mrs. Peterson assured her. "Don't you worry about Fletcher Kincaid." As if summoned by his name, the door downstairs crashed open, followed by the thunder of boots on the stairs. Fletcher appeared in the doorway, snow-covered and wild-eyed. "Thea," he exclaimed, rushing to her side. "I came as soon as word reached me. Nearly had to abandon my horse and continue on foot when the drifts got too deep." She reached for his hand, relief washing over her. "You're here." "That's what matters." "Wouldn't miss this for the world," he promised, pressing a kiss to her damp forehead. With Fletcher by her side, Thea found new reserves of strength. As midnight approached, Doc Wilson's encouraging voice guided her through the final stages of labor. "One more push, Mrs. Kincaid," he urged. "Your baby's almost here." Gathering her remaining energy, Thea bore down with Fletcher supporting her shoulders. A moment of searing pressure, then sudden relief followed by the indignant wail of new life entering the world. "A boy," Doc Wilson announced, holding up the red-faced, squalling infant. "A fine, healthy son." Fletcher's face transformed with wonder and pride. "A son," he repeated, voice thick with emotion. "Thea, you did it. You're incredible." Exhausted but triumphant, Thea reached for her child as the doctor placed the swaddled bundle in her arms. The baby's cries softened as she cradled him close, studying the perfect features with awe. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We've been waiting for you." Fletcher perched carefully on the edge of the bed, one arm around Thea's shoulders as he gazed down at his son. "He's perfect," he murmured. Absolutely perfect. Thomas, Thea said suddenly, looking up at her husband, after my father, and Fletcher for his middle name after you. Thomas Fletcher Kincaid. Fletcher tested the name, then nodded approval. Strong name for a strong boy. As the new family shared their first moments together, the snow outside gradually ceased, stars appearing in the clearing sky, nature's own celebration of the new life that had arrived in Palisade that snowy January night. The years that followed brought growth and change to the Kincaid family. Thomas Tommy to his father, and most of Palisade, grew into a sturdy, curious boy with his mother's thoughtful eyes and his father's ready smile. By his second birthday, he was already attempting to help Thea measure ingredients, his small hands delighting in the feel of flour and the sound of sugar being poured. The bakery continued to thrive under Thea's management, though she now employed an assistant to handle the days when ranch responsibilities kept her away from town. Her reputation for healing with herbs also grew, bringing people from neighboring communities seeking her remedies for ailments that conventional medicine couldn't cure. Fletcher expanded the ranch, adding a dairy operation that provided Palisade with fresh milk and butter. The small cottage he'd proposed building near town became a reality, providing the family with a comfortable second home for the days Thea needed to be at the bakery. In the spring of Tommy's 4th year, Thea gave birth to twin daughters Elizabeth and Catherine, who inherited their mother's precision and their father's determined spirit in equal measure. Fletcher declared himself happily outnumbered as he built cradles and rocking horses, the ranch house expanding along with their growing family. Through it all, the foundation of their life together remained the balance they had found between Fletcher's spontaneous nature and Thea's meticulous attention to detail. Their differences, once potential obstacles, had become their greatest strength as a couple. On the 10th anniversary of their wedding, Fletcher surprised Thea by closing the bakery for the day and whisking her away on horseback to a flower-filled meadow on their property. A picnic awaited them there, complete with a small cake he had attempted to bake himself. "It's a bit lopsided," he admitted as he presented it to her. "Turns out there might be something to this measurement business after all." Thea laughed, touched by his effort. "It looks delicious," she assured him, accepting a slightly irregular slice. As they sat together in the warm sunshine, the ranch sprawling below them and the mountains rising majestically in the distance, Fletcher took her hand. "10 years ago, I told you my love couldn't be measured," he said, his voice still carrying the same warmth that had first captivated her in the bakery so long ago. "Do you believe me yet?" Thea smiled, thinking of the life they had built together, the children waiting at home with Mrs. Peterson, the business they had grown, the countless moments, both ordinary and extraordinary, they had shared. "I believe you," she said softly, "though as a woman of science I've conducted thorough research on the matter." "Is that so?" he asked, eyes crinkling with amusement. "And what are your findings, Mrs. Kincaid?" She leaned forward, cupping his beloved face between her hands. "That some quantities truly are infinite," she whispered against his lips. "And that, my love, is the most precise measurement of all." As the afternoon sun bathed them in golden light, they shared a kiss that held the promise of all the years to come, years that would continue to prove that, while Theodora Kincaid might measure ingredients with unwavering precision, Fletcher Kincaid had been right from the start about the one thing that would always remain immeasurable: the love between a determined baker and the cowboy who had won her carefully guarded heart. In the autumn of their 15th year together, Palisade celebrated its founding with a town festival that brought visitors from miles around. The Kincaid family was at the heart of the celebration, Fletcher serving as head of the organizing committee, Thea providing an abundance of baked goods, and their children participating enthusiastically in games and performances. Tommy, now 14 and nearly as tall as his father, helped younger children with pony rides while 12-year-old twins Lizzie and Kat sold flowers they had grown themselves in the garden behind the bakery. Their youngest, 7-year-old James, proudly wore a sheriff's badge as he patrolled the festivities with a wooden gun in his belt. As dusk approached, lanterns were lit throughout the town square, creating a magical atmosphere for the evening's dance. Musicians set up on a wooden platform, tuning instruments and testing the sound as townspeople began to gather. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Kincaid?" Fletcher asked formally, appearing at Thea's side as she arranged the last of her prize-winning pies on the judging table. She turned to find him freshly shaved and wearing his best suit, looking remarkably similar to the man who had courted her all those years ago. Only the touch of silver at his temples and the laugh lines around his eyes revealed the passage of time. "I would be delighted, Mr. Kincaid," she replied, allowing him to lead her to the dance floor as the music began. Other couples joined them, some young and just beginning their courtships, others who had shared decades together. As Fletcher guided her through the familiar steps, Thea caught glimpses of their children among the crowd. Tommy shyly asking Sally Watson's daughter to dance, the twins giggling with friends near the refreshment table, little James solemnly attempting to copy his father's dance moves with Mrs. Hollister's granddaughter. "Look at what we've created," Fletcher murmured, following her gaze to their family. "Not bad for a ranch hand and a baker, wouldn't you say?" "Not bad at all," she agreed, leaning into his familiar embrace as the music slowed. Later that night, after the children were asleep and the house had settled into peaceful silence, they sat together on the porch swing Fletcher had built when Tommy was born. The stars above their ranch seemed especially brilliant, the Milky Way a river of light across the velvet darkness. "I've been thinking," Fletcher said, his arm warm around her shoulders. "A dangerous pastime," Thea teased, using the phrase that had become a fond joke between them over the years. He chuckled, pulling her closer. "I'm serious. I've been thinking about expanding the ranch again." "Oh." She turned to see his face better in the dim light. "In what direction?" "I was approached by a land agent from back east yesterday. Seems there's interest in establishing a proper cooking school in these parts, teaching traditional Western cuisine alongside more refined techniques. They're looking for a suitable property and knowledgeable instructors." Thea sat up straighter. "A cooking school? Here?" "The railroads made Palisade more accessible than ever," Fletcher pointed out, "and your reputation has spread. The agent specifically mentioned your name. Seems your remedies and baked goods have become somewhat famous beyond our little town." "I had no idea," Thea said, genuinely surprised. "You wouldn't," he said affectionately. "You're too busy measuring flour and raising our children to notice your own growing fame." He took her hand, his expression growing more serious. "What would you think about selling them a few acres near the east pasture and perhaps teaching a few classes? The main school would be in Denver, but they want to offer special sessions in rural settings." Thea considered the idea, mentally calculating the possibilities with her usual precision. "It would mean adjusting our schedules. The twins will be attending the secondary school in town next year, and Tommy's talking about apprenticing with Doc Wilson." "We'd make it work," Fletcher said confidently. "We always do." She smiled, recognizing the truth in his words. Over 15 years, they had faced droughts and blizzards, economic downturns and personal losses. Through it all, they had adjusted and adapted, their different approaches complementing each other in ways neither could have predicted when they first met. "I think," she said slowly, "that it sounds like an exciting opportunity. The chance to teach proper measuring techniques to a new generation would be quite satisfying." Fletcher laughed, the sound still as warm and rich as it had been on that first day in her bakery. "That's my Thea. Always championing precision. It matters," she insisted, though her tone was light. "Though I will admit that some of your more improvisational approaches have yielded surprisingly good results over the years." "Such as," he prompted, clearly enjoying the rare admission. "Such as suggesting we court when I was determined to focus only on my business, or deciding we needed twin daughters instead of just one, or adding sage to my chicken soup recipe." "Ah, so you admit the sage was an improvement, a small one," she conceded graciously. "Though I maintain it should be measured, not simply tossed in by the handful." Fletcher captured her hand, bringing it to his lips for a kiss that still sent warmth cascading through her after all their years together. "Know what I think, Thea Kincaid?" "What's that?" "I think we're the perfect recipe. A bit of precision, a bit of spontaneity mixed together in exactly the right proportions." Thea leaned her head against his shoulder, contentment washing over her as she considered the life they had built together. The bakery that had grown into a thriving business. The ranch that now employed 5 hands and produced some of the finest livestock in Colorado. The 4 children who combined the best of both their parents in unique and wonderful ways. "I believe you may be right," she said softly. "Though I'm still analyzing the exact measurements of that particular formula." Fletcher's laugh rumbled beneath her ear. "Some things defy measurement, my love. I've been telling you that since the beginning." As they rocked gently beneath the canopy of stars, Thea silently acknowledged the truth she had come to embrace over their years together. Fletcher had been right that day in her bakery so long ago. Some things, the most important things, could never be precisely quantified. The love between them, the family they had created, the life they continued to build day by day, these were beyond calculation, beyond measurement, beyond any scale she could devise. And in that immeasurable abundance, Theodora Kincaid had found the greatest precision of all, the perfect balance of a life fully lived and deeply loved. "You know what tomorrow is?" Fletcher asked as they finally rose to go inside, the night growing cool around them. "Tuesday." Thea replied innocently, though a smile played at her lips. "Very funny," he mock-growled, pulling her close. "It's the anniversary of the day you first lectured me about proper flour measurement, the day I started falling in love with you. You remember the exact date?" she asked, genuinely touched. "Some things are worth measuring precisely," he said softly, brushing a kiss across her forehead. "Even a spontaneous cowboy knows that." Hand in hand, they walked into the home they had built together, their steps in perfect rhythm just as they had been from the moment a precise baker and an improvisational cowboy had discovered that love, in all its immeasurable glory, was the one ingredient neither could live without.